You're a burden. Get out of this house. Those were the words my son said as he shoved $500 into my hand and told me to be gone by morning. Not because I had done anything wrong, but because his pregnant wife said seeing me in the house made her uncomfortable. After 42 years of raising him and building his future, that was my final value. I got on a bus and left that painful city behind. He thought throwing me out would break me, but good people don't collapse, they adapt. What he didn't know was that just a few months later, he would be on his knees begging me to save him the moment the boardroom door finally opened. Welcome back to Family Revenge Stories, and thank you for clicking on this video. Before we go any further, pause for a second and leave a comment. Where are you watching from? And how hot or cold is it where you live today? Your comments help build this community more than you know. Also, please note, this story includes fictional elements added for entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real names or settings is purely coincidental, but the message I'm sharing with you is meant to be meaningful. The kitchen was warm. Steam rose from the pot of beef stew I'd been simmering for 3 hours, the same recipe Catherine used to make the one Connor loved as a boy. I'd chopped the carrots into perfect coins, browned the meat until it was tender, added just enough thyme. This wasn't just dinner. This was my language. The only way I knew how to say I love you anymore. Smells good, Dad. Connor's voice came from the dining room, but it was thin, distracted. He was scrolling through his phone, barely looking up. I ladled the stew into bowls, arranged them on the table with fresh bread I'd picked up that morning. Ashley waddled in one hand on her swollen belly, the other massaging her lower back, 7 months pregnant. My first grandchild. I should have been over the moon. Gary, is this gluten-free bread? She asked, eyeing the loaf like it might bite her. No, just regular sourdough from... I can't eat that. She sat down heavily, pushing the bread plate away. Connor, didn't you tell him about my restrictions? Connor finally looked up from his phone. Dad, we talked about this. I don't remember us talking about it. But lately I don't remember a lot of things they claim we discussed. Doctor says my memory's fine. I think they just don't want to repeat themselves. Sorry, I muttered, heading back to the kitchen. I'll make you some rice. Ashley sighed loud enough for me to hear. Connor said nothing. I stood at the stove, boiling water, feeling the silence press against my back. This house, the one I'd helped Connor buy 5 years ago, the one I moved into after Catherine died, used to feel like home. Now it felt like I was renting space in my own son's life. Gary. Ashley's voice again. Sharper this time. Can we talk? I brought her the rice, sat down across from them. Connor still wouldn't meet my eyes. The baby's room. Ashley began folding her hands over her belly like she was cradling something precious. We've been thinking. We need your room. The words didn't register at first. I blinked. My room. It's the biggest bedroom, she continued, her tone matter of fact. The nursery needs space for the crib, the changing table, storage. Your room has the best light, the closet space. Ashley. I tried to keep my voice steady. Where would I go? Connor cleared his throat. Finally, he looked at me. His eyes were hard, decided. Dad, we've been talking. This isn't working. What isn't working? Not this. He gestured vaguely around the table. You being here. It's too much. Too much. I cooked for them. I cleaned. I stayed out of their way. I paid for groceries half the time, even though Connor said I didn't have to. What was too much about any of that? Connor, I don't understand. You're a burden, Dad. His voice cracked, but he pushed through it. A liability. We're about to have a baby. We need space. We need privacy. We need... He stopped rubbing his face. We need you to leave. The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. Leave. The word felt foreign in my mouth. This is my home. It's our home, Ashley said coldly. We own it. We've been more than generous letting you stay here rent-free for 3 years. But Connor's right. It's time. I looked at my son, the boy I'd raised, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike to tie a tie to scramble eggs on Sunday mornings after Catherine died because he said it made him feel close to her. That boy was gone. In his place sat a stranger. Connor, I whispered, please. He stood up, walked to the counter, pulled out his wallet. He counted out $500 bills, laid them on the table in front of me. Find a motel. Find an apartment. I don't care, but you need to be gone by morning. Morning. My voice cracked. That's not even 12 hours. Get out, old man. Connor's jaw tightened. We need your room for the baby. Ashley didn't even flinch. I sat there staring at the money. $500. That's what 35 years of fatherhood was worth to him. $500 and a demand to disappear by sunrise. Outside rain began to fall. I could hear it tapping against the kitchen window, soft at first, then harder. I thought about Catherine, how she used to love the rain, how she'd stand at that same window, coffee in hand, and smile at the sound of it. What would she say if she could see this? I picked up the bills, folded them carefully, and stood. My legs felt weak, but I made it to my room. The room that would be a nursery in a few days. I pulled my 2 old suitcases from the closet, the ones Catherine and I used on our honeymoon to Napa Valley 40 years ago. I started packing. Clothes, shoes, a photo of Catherine, my chef's knife, the one I'd used for 42 years. 42 years of fatherhood, and it all fit into 2 bags. The suitcases felt heavier than they should have as I lifted them off the bed. Not because of what was inside, just clothes, a few books, that old chef's knife, but because of what they represented. Everything. I was reduced to 2 pieces of luggage Catherine and I had bought for our honeymoon. I stood at the bedroom door one last time. The room that would be a nursery in a week. New paint, new furniture, no trace of me left. I turned off the light and walked into the hallway. The stairs creaked under my weight. How many times had I climbed these stairs? Thousands, tens of thousands. Always with purpose, carrying groceries, helping Connor move furniture, rushing down when Catherine called me for dinner. Now I was descending them for the last time, and no one cared. Their bedroom door was closed. A sliver of light showed underneath. They were awake. They knew I was leaving. Neither of them came out to say goodbye. I reached the bottom of the stairs and set the suitcases down by the front door. My hands were shaking, not from the weight, from the realization that this was real. This was actually happening. And then Catherine's voice filled my head. Not a memory, something deeper. Something I'd carried for 3 years since the day she made me promise. 2020, 3 years ago. The hospital room was too quiet. The machines had been turned off an hour before, per her wishes. Just me, Catherine, and the sound of rain against the window. Always rain when the worst things happened. Oh, Gary. Her voice was so faint I had to lean in close. I need to tell you something. You need to rest, sweetheart. No. Her hand found mine grip surprisingly strong. Connor, he's not yours. Not biologically. I didn't pull away, didn't gasp, didn't flinch. I know, I said quietly. Her eyes went wide, tears spilling over. You knew since the beginning. I saw the dates, Catherine. I did the math. But it didn't matter then, and it doesn't matter now. Why didn't you ever say anything? I smoothed her hair back the way I'd done for 40 years. Because he is mine. I was there when he took his first steps. I taught him to tie his shoes. I scared away the monsters under his bed. I held him when you were too tired. Blood doesn't make a father, Catherine. Showing up makes a father. She was sobbing now, her thin shoulders shaking. I was so scared you'd leave if you knew. I was so scared. I would never leave you. Or him. He's my son. He's our son. Promise me, she whispered, gripping my hand with the last of her strength. Promise me you'll never tell him. He can't know Gary. It would destroy him. He idolizes you. If he found out, I promise. I pressed my forehead to hers, breathing in the faint scent of her lavender soap. He's my boy. That's all he needs to know. That's all I need to know. She smiled, then peaceful for the first time in weeks. You're a better man than I deserved, Gary Parker. No, sweetheart. You deserved the world. I just gave you what I could. 3 hours later, she was gone. I came back to the present, standing in the entryway of a house that no longer wanted me. The wedding photo was still in my jacket pocket, pressed against my heart. I picked up the suitcases, opened the front door. The rain hit me like a wall, cold, relentless, unforgiving. It soaked through my jacket before I'd even stepped off the porch. I walked down the driveway, one slow step at a time. The suitcases banged against my legs with every step, but I didn't stop. Halfway down, I felt it. A presence. Eyes. Was he watching? Was Connor standing at the upstairs window, seeing his father walk away in the rain with everything he owned? I didn't turn around. I couldn't. If I looked back and saw him, there saw regret, saw guilt, saw anything, I didn't know what I'd do. Beg him to let me stay. Tell him I was sorry for being a burden. Break my promise to Catherine and scream the truth. And if I looked back and saw nothing, if the window was dark, if he'd already moved on to baby names and nursery colors, that would be worse. So I kept walking. The rain plastered my hair to my skull, ran down my collar, soaked through my shoes. Let it wash me away. Let it erase 35 years of bedtime stories and little league games and teaching him how to cook his mother's beef stew. At the end of the driveway, I stopped. Turned around one last time. The house glowed warm through the rain. I'd built that kitchen. I'd painted Connor's nursery. I'd held Catherine in that living room the night the doctor told us there was nothing more they could do. And now it was just a house I used to live in. I whispered to the rain, to the darkness, to wherever she was now. If you can hear me, our son just broke my heart. The lights went out. Upstairs first, then the living room, then the porch light. Darkness swallowed the house whole, and I turned away. The bus stop was 3 blocks north. I started walking. The Greyhound station smelled like burnt coffee and diesel fuel. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. I stood at the ticket counter with my 2 suitcases at my feet and $500 bills in my hand, everything Connor had given me to disappear. Where to? The clerk didn't look up from her computer. Where can I get for $47, Ma? She glanced at me, then really looked at me. Wet jacket, bloodshot eyes. Gray hair plastered to my head from last night's rain. She knew exactly what kind of passenger I was. Portland, Oregon. Leaves in 20 minutes. Gate 4. I slid the bills across the counter. She printed my ticket without another word. The bus was half empty. I took a window seat near the back, shoved my suitcases into the overhead compartment, and collapsed into the cracked vinyl. My whole body ached, not from lifting the bags, but from the weight of everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. The engine rumbled to life. The bus pulled out of the station, and California started to disappear behind me. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass and closed my eyes. You're a burden, Dad. A liability. Connor's voice echoed in my head over and over like a song I couldn't turn off. I'd raised him, fed him, taught him everything I knew, and in the end, that's what I was to him. A burden. Maybe he was right. The bus stopped in Sacramento. A young mother got on maybe 25 with a toddler on her hip and a diaper bag slung over her shoulder. The kid was crying that exhausted, inconsolable wail that every parent recognizes. She looked around frantically for an empty seat, and I caught her eye. "Here," I said, gesturing to the empty seat beside me. "Plenty of room." She sank down gratefully, bouncing the baby on her knee. "Thank you. Sorry about the noise." Don't apologize. Kids cry. That's what they do." She smiled weakly, but the baby didn't stop. The wailing got louder. Other passengers started shooting us annoyed looks. "When's the last time he ate?" I asked. "This morning. I thought I had more formula, but Her voice cracked. "I didn't pack enough." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the sandwich I'd bought at the station. Turkey and Swiss on wheat. I hadn't touched it. "Not here. You need it more than I do." "I can't." "Please." I pressed it into her hands. "I've raised a kid. I know what it's like." She took it, tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you." I turned back to the window while she ate. The baby quieted down after a few minutes, probably picking up on his mother's relief. I should have felt good about helping, but all I felt was empty. Am I really a burden? The question circled in my head like a vulture. I'd worked every day since I was 14. Dishwasher, line cook, sous chef, head chef, restaurant owner. 54 years in kitchens. I'd built something. I'd provided. And then Catherine died. And I'd moved in with Connor because he said he needed me. He said he wanted me close. He said, what had he said exactly? I couldn't remember anymore. Maybe he'd never wanted me there. Maybe Ashley had been pushing him to kick me out since day one. Maybe I'd been too blind to see it. Did I fail him? Did I fail as a father? The bus rolled on. California turned into Oregon. Hours blurred together. We pulled into Portland just after 7 p.m. The city was gray and drizzly, fitting somehow. I grabbed my suitcases and stepped off the bus into a place I'd never been, with no plan and nowhere to go. I stood on the sidewalk watching people hurry past. Everyone had somewhere to be. Everyone except me. "Excuse me." I stopped an older man in a raincoat. "Is there a shelter nearby, somewhere I can stay tonight?" He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "St. Vincent's. About 6 blocks that way. They'll take care of you. Thank you." I walked. Again. Always walking. St. Vincent's Shelter was a low brick building with bars on the windows and a faded sign above the door. Inside, it smelled like industrial cleaner and old sweat. A nun sat at the front desk, maybe 65, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense expression. "First time?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "I'm Sister Agnes. Welcome to St. Vincent's." She slid a clipboard across the desk. "Fill this out. We've got beds available tonight. Dinner's already finished, but I can get you some soup if you're hungry." "Thank you, sister." I filled out the form with shaking hands. Name, age, emergency contact, I left that blank. She didn't comment. "You're in bed 34, second floor all the way at the end. Bathrooms down the hall, lights out at 10. She handed me a thin blanket and a small toiletry kit. I climbed the stairs, found my bed, a narrow bunk with a sagging mattress, and sat down. Around me, men were already settling in for the night. Some talked quietly. Some stared at the ceiling. Some were already snoring. I was 68 years old. I'd worked every single day since I was 14. And this was where I'd ended up. Maybe Connor was right. Maybe I was a burden. I lay down on the thin mattress, pulled the blanket up to my chin, and stared at the water-stained ceiling. Tomorrow. I'd figure it out tomorrow. The alarm went off at 5 a.m., a shrill bell that jolted me awake. Around me, men groaned and shuffled toward the bathroom. I sat up, disoriented, and then I smelled it. Food. Cooking. But not good cooking. Industrial, mass-produced, over-salted garbage. I followed the smell downstairs to the kitchen. Through the serving window, I could see a younger volunteer, maybe 30, dumping powdered eggs into a pot of boiling water. He was stirring it like concrete, no finesse, no care. My chef's instincts kicked in before I could stop them. That's not how you cook eggs. They called it breakfast. I called it an insult to food. I'd been at St. Vincent's for a week now, and every morning was the same. Powdered eggs rehydrated with too much water. Toast burned black on the edges, raw in the middle. Coffee that tasted like diesel fuel. The men ate it anyway, because what choice did they have? I sat at one of the long cafeteria tables, watching a tray of rubbery eggs get passed down the line. The man across from me, 60-something, weathered face, Marine Corps tattoo on his forearm, stabbed at his breakfast with a plastic fork and grimaced. "First week?" he asked, noticing me staring. "Yeah, this gets worse before it gets better." He pushed the eggs around his plate. "Name's Roy. Roy Jenkins. You, Gary Parker." "Well, Gary Parker, welcome to the bottom." He gestured around the cafeteria. "Food's terrible, but it's free. Can't complain." "You should be able to complain," I said quietly. "A man deserves dignity, and dignity starts with a decent meal." Roy looked at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. "You one of those foodie types?" "I was a chef. 42 years. "No kidding." He leaned back, studying me. "What did you do, lose your restaurant?" "Lost my family." The words came out before I could stop them. Roy didn't pry. He just nodded like he understood. Maybe he did. I turned my attention back to the serving line. The young volunteer behind the counter, maybe 30, wearing a stained apron and a defeated expression, was scraping burnt eggs off the industrial griddle. He was in over his head. No training, no technique. Just a kid trying to feed 80 men with equipment he didn't know how to use. He dropped a tray. Scrambled eggs splattered across the floor. A few men groaned. Most didn't even look up. The volunteer's face went red. He grabbed a mop, started cleaning, and I saw his hands shaking. I knew that feeling. The panic of a kitchen falling apart around you. The shame of failing when people are counting on you. I stood up. "Where you going?" Roy asked. "To do something useful." Sister Agnes was in her office, a cramped room off the main hallway, piled high with donation boxes and paperwork. She looked up when I knocked on the open door. "Mr. Parker, everything all right?" "Sister, I'd like to cook tomorrow. Just one meal. Let me show you what I can do." She set down her pen, her expression unreadable. "We have volunteers for that. I know, and they're doing their best. But I'm a professional chef. 42 years. I know how to make a good meal even with limited resources." "Mr. Parker, we don't have a budget. We work with canned goods, day-old bread, whatever gets donated. It's not exactly fine dining. I don't need fine dining ingredients, sister. I just need permission to use that kitchen." She studied me for a long moment. I could see the wheels turning. Was I reliable? Would I steal? Was this some kind of scam? "One meal," she finally said. "Tomorrow's breakfast. You make something the men will eat, and we'll talk about doing it again. But if you waste food or cause problems, I won't, I promise." She handed me a key to the kitchen. 5 a.m., don't be late. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed 34, listening to the symphony of snores around me, and thought about tomorrow. What could I make with canned goods and donations? How could I turn institutional slop into something that tasted like someone cared? At midnight, I gave up trying to sleep. I took the key Sister Agnes had given me and went downstairs. The kitchen was dark. I flipped on the lights, and the industrial space hummed to life. Stainless steel counters, a massive griddle ovens big enough to roast a whole pig. It wasn't the gleaming kitchens I'd worked in for 40 years, but it was familiar. It was home. I opened the walk-in cooler. Canned tomatoes, canned beans, day-old bread, eggs, real eggs donated from a local farm about to expire, cheese ends, half a bag of potatoes, onions starting to sprout. Not much, but enough. I pulled out a cutting board and started chopping. Onions first diced small, potatoes cubed. I could make a scramble not fancy but real, with flavor, with care. I worked in silence the way I used to in the early morning hours at my old restaurant. Just me and the food and the rhythm of the knife against the cutting board. At some point, Roy appeared in the doorway. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. Something like that. He leaned against the doorframe watching me work. "You really were a chef, huh?" "Still am. I just forgot for a little while." "Well, Gary Parker," he said, a hint of a smile on his weathered face. "I hope you remember by morning, because if you screw this up, those guys upstairs are gonna riot." I smiled, the first real smile I'd felt in weeks. Then I'd better not screw it up. 5 a.m. came fast. I tied on a borrowed apron, stained, frayed, but clean, and fired up the griddle. The men started lining up in the cafeteria, grumbling about the early hour, expecting the usual disaster. Roy was first in line. He grinned at me through the serving window. "The old man's cooking today," he shouted to the room. "This is gonna be interesting." A few men laughed. Most just looked skeptical. I took a deep breath, grabbed my spatula, and got to work. I had $4.17 worth of canned beans, rice, and wilted vegetables. And I was about to cook the most important meal of my life. The industrial kitchen was quiet at 5:30 a.m. Just me, the hum of the refrigerator, and the weight of 80 hungry men waiting upstairs. I'd laid out my ingredients on the steel counter like a surgeon preparing for an operation. Canned black beans, day-old onions, half a bag of brown rice, carrots going soft, a handful of fresh herbs from Sister Agnes's tiny garden behind the building. Not much, but enough. I started with the onions, diced them small the way Catherine taught me when we first opened our restaurant. "Respect the ingredients, Gary," she used to say. "Even the cheap ones deserve your attention." The griddle hissed as I swept the onions across the hot surface. The smell filled the kitchen, sweet, sharp, alive. I added the carrots, let them caramelize, poured in the beans with their liquid, stirred in the rice I'd cooked earlier. A pinch of cumin from a donated spice jar. Salt. Pepper. Fresh cilantro torn by hand. Simple, honest, real. At 6 a.m., Roy pushed through the kitchen door, already grinning. "Smells like heaven in here, Gary. You sure you didn't smuggle in a Michelin star?" "Just beans and rice, Roy." "Nah." He leaned over the griddle, breathing deep. "That's not just beans and rice. That's somebody giving a damn." The men lined up at 6:15. I could hear them through the serving window, the usual grumbling, the scrape of chairs, the resignation of people expecting the worst. I filled the first plate, spooned the beans, and rice, carefully added a slice of toasted bread I'd brushed with olive oil and garlic. Placed it on the counter. "Good morning," I said, meeting the man's eyes. He blinked, surprised. Nobody said good morning in a shelter cafeteria. He took the plate without a word. I served the next man, and the next. Each time I looked them in the eye. Each time I said good morning. Each time I made sure the portion was generous, the presentation as clean as I could manage with plastic plates and institutional serving spoons. The cafeteria went quiet. I glanced through the window. The first man, a thin guy with hollow eyes, had taken a bite. He'd stopped chewing. He was just sitting there, fork halfway to his mouth, staring at his plate. Then he started crying. Not loud, just silent tears running down his face while he ate. Roy sat down next to him. "You okay, Ron?" The man Ron apparently nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "It tastes like my mother used to make. I haven't felt like a person in so long." Another man spoke up, voice thick. "This is real food. Somebody actually cooked this. For us." Aaron Blake, a younger guy with track marks on his arms and 90 days sober under his belt, didn't say anything. He just nodded at me through the window, eyes wet, and kept eating like the food might disappear if he looked away. The room filled with the sound of forks against plates. No conversation. just men eating with something close to reverence. Sister Agnes appeared beside me, arms crossed, watching through the window. "Mr. Parker," she said quietly. "What did you do?" "I just cooked breakfast, sister." "No." She shook her head. "You gave them their dignity back." By 7 a.m., every plate was empty. The men stood pushed in their chairs, and several of them came to the kitchen window. "Thank you, chef," one said. "Best meal I've had in years," said another. Roy clapped me on the shoulder. "I told you, Gary. You're not just a chef. You're a damn miracle worker." I didn't know what to say. I'd spent 42 years cooking in high-end restaurants, chasing Michelin stars, plating food for people who ate out of boredom. And here in a shelter kitchen, with $4 of ingredients, I'd finally done something that mattered. I stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the cafeteria watching the men leave. Some were smiling. Some were still wiping their eyes. All of them looked a little more human than they had an hour ago. For 42 years, I cooked to make money. I whispered to myself. Today, I cooked to heal souls, and I found myself in the process. Sister Agnes caught me as I was cleaning up. She stood in the kitchen doorway, hands folded in front of her habit, studying me with those sharp, kind eyes. "Mr. Parker, would you consider staying cooking every day? I can't pay you, but—" "I'll stay," I said, my voice cracking. "Sister, I'll stay." She smiled, a real smile, warm and full of relief. "Then welcome to the team, Mr. Parker. Breakfast is at 6. Don't be late." I'd been cooking at the shelter for 3 weeks when the man with the expensive watch walked in. It was Tuesday evening dinner service, beef stew night, and the cafeteria was filling up with the usual crowd. Roy Jenkins at his corner table, Ron Foster with his construction crew buddies, Aaron Blake sitting alone 90 days sober and counting. I knew their routines by now, knew who liked extra bread, who needed their stew thinned with broth, who'd lost their teeth and needed everything soft. But this man, I'd never seen him before. He stood in the doorway, mid-50s, maybe wearing dark slacks and a charcoal sweater that probably cost more than my first car. His shoes were polished. His hair was gray but professionally cut, and on his wrist I noticed it. When he reached for a tray was a watch that could have fed everyone in this room for a month. He didn't belong here. That much was obvious. But he moved through the serving line like he did. No hesitation, no discomfort. He just picked up a tray and waited his turn. I ladled the stew into his bowl, the same generous portion I gave everyone. Added a slice of fresh bread Sister Agnes had gotten a donation from a local bakery that morning. Placed it on his tray and met his eyes. "Good evening, sir. Beef stew tonight. Made it with care." He nodded once, his expression unreadable. "Thank you." He took his tray and sat down at table 7 right in the middle of the room. Not hiding in a corner, not trying to disappear. Just sitting, eating. I watched him through the serving window while I filled the next man's plate. He ate slowly, deliberately. Cut the beef into small pieces, soaked the bread in the broth, chewed with his eyes closed like he was analyzing every flavor. This wasn't a man eating because he was hungry. This was a man studying the food. After a few minutes, he opened his eyes and looked straight at the kitchen window. Straight at me. A chill ran down my spine. Not fear exactly. More like the feeling you get when someone sees through you. When they know something about you that you haven't told them yet. After dinner service ended, I was wiping down the industrial griddle when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around. The man from table 7 stood in the kitchen doorway, tray in hand. "Chef," he said quietly. "May I speak with you? I'm not really a chef here, just a volunteer." "But sure. What can I do for you?" He set the tray down on the steel counter. The bowl was spotless, not a drop of broth left. Even the bread was gone. "So that was extraordinary," he said. "I've eaten at Michelin-starred restaurants across 3 continents. Paris, Tokyo, New York. What you just served me? It belongs in that conversation." I blinked. "It's just beef stew, sir. Nothing fancy." "No." He shook his head. "It's not just anything. The caramelization on those onions took patience. The seasoning was precise. The meat was tender but not overdone. You built layers of flavor with ingredients most chefs would throw away. That's not luck. That's mastery. I didn't know what to say. I wiped my hands on my apron, suddenly aware of how worn it was. How worn I was. "Who are you?" he asked. "Nobody special. Just a volunteer. Name's Gary. I'm staying here temporarily. Long story. I'd like to hear it." Why, I met his eyes. "Who are you?" He extended his hand. "Alexander Donovan. Most people call me Alex. I own a few businesses. Real estate, restaurants, investments. And I make it my business to recognize talent when I see it." I shook his hand, confused. His grip was firm but not aggressive, confident. "Mr. Donovan, I appreciate the compliment, but I don't understand what you're doing here. This is a shelter. For people who need help." "I know." He leaned against the counter, studying me like I was a puzzle he was trying to solve. "I heard about a chef at St. Vincent's who was changing lives with canned beans and day-old bread. I wanted to see for myself if the rumors were true." "Rumors." "You've been here 3 weeks, Gary. In that time, attendance at meals has tripled. Sister Agnes tells me the men are showing up sober, clean, on time. Some of them have started looking for jobs again. You know why?" I shook my head. "Because you gave them their dignity back. One meal at a time." He paused. "That's a rare gift. And it's being wasted in a place like this." I bristled. "This place isn't a waste. These men—" "I didn't mean it that way." He held up a hand. "I meant you could do so much more. With the right resources, the right support." "Support for what?" He smiled, then a slow, calculating smile. "That's what I'm here to figure out. Gary, let me ask you something. Do you still have ambition, or is this just charity?" The question hit me like a fist. Ambition. I'd spent 42 years chasing it, bigger kitchens, better reviews, Michelin stars. And where had it gotten me? Kicked out of my son's house, living in a shelter, cooking with $4 of donated ingredients. "I don't understand what you're asking," I said carefully. "I'm asking if you want to rebuild, or if you're content to coast on kindness for the rest of your life." "Mr. Donovan." "Alex." "Alex." I corrected, my jaw tight. "I lost everything 3 weeks ago, my home, my family. I'm 68 years old, living in a homeless shelter, and you're asking me about ambition." He didn't flinch. "Yes, because I see something in you that most people your age have lost. Fire, purpose, the ability to create something meaningful out of nothing. And I want to know if that fire is still burning, or if you've let it die." I stared at him, heart pounding. "Just think about it," he said, pulling a business card from his pocket and setting it on the counter. "When you're ready to talk, call me." He walked out of the kitchen, his expensive shoes clicking against the tile floor. I picked up the card. Alexander Donovan, founder and CEO, Donovan Holdings. I stood there for a long time, staring at that card, while the kitchen emptied around me. What could he want from a 68-year-old man living in a shelter? "I want you to run a restaurant for me." The stranger's words hung in the air like smoke. I stood there in the kitchen, staring at Alex Donovan's business card, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Before I could think too hard about it, Sister Agnes appeared in the doorway. "Yo, Mr. Parker, Mr. Donovan asked if you'd join him in my office. He says it's important." I followed her down the narrow hallway to a small room barely big enough for a desk and 2 chairs. Alex stood by the window looking out at the parking lot. He turned when I entered. "Gary, thanks for coming. Please sit." Sister Agnes closed the door behind her as she left, and suddenly the room felt even smaller. "Mr. Donovan." "Alex," he corrected gently. "Please." "Alex." I sat down in the worn chair across from the desk. "I need to understand what's happening here. You show up at a homeless shelter, eat my beef stew, and now you want to talk about restaurants. Who are you? He smiled, but there was sadness in it. Fair question. I own Pacific Rim Hotel Group. 20 hotels, 15 restaurants up and down the West Coast. Revenue last year was just over 400 million. I blinked. Then why are you eating at a shelter? He sat down across from me, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. Because my father worked 3 jobs and died at 55. Heart attack in a motel room alone, too proud to ask for help. Before he died, he experienced housing insecurity for a few months. That's the polite term. The real term is he slept in his car and ate at shelters. The air left my lungs. I'm sorry. I was 23, working my first real job. I didn't even know he was struggling until after he was gone. Alex's voice cracked slightly. So I made a promise. Every month I visit a shelter somewhere. I eat a meal, I honor his memory, and I test something. Test what? A character. He met my eyes. Wealthy people lie to impress me. Desperate people show me who they really are. I've been testing potential partners for 2 years. You're the first to pass. Pass what I just served you dinner. No. You served everyone with the same respect, the same care. You didn't see donors or charity cases. You saw human beings. And when I complimented you, you deflected. You didn't try to sell yourself or ask for anything. You just wanted to feed people well. He paused. That's the rarest quality in this business. Humility paired with excellence. I didn't know what to say. My hands were shaking, so I gripped the armrests. I have a restaurant space, Alex continued. 2,800 square feet in Northeast Portland. Been vacant for 6 months. Previous owner went bankrupt trying to run it like a corporate chain. But the bones are good. Industrial kitchen dining room for 60, great location near public transit. Why are you telling me this? Because I want to invest $500,000. Renovations equipment, 6 months of operating expenses. You'd have 60% equity. I'd take 40. The number hit me like a truck. 500,000, that's... There are conditions, he said quickly. You hire staff from the shelter. Give them real wages, real training, real respect. And every Sunday, you serve free meals to anyone who needs one. No questions asked. Why? My voice cracked. Why would you do this for a stranger? Alex stood up, walked to the window again. His back was to me, but I could hear the emotion in his voice. Because someone helped me when I had nothing. A restaurant owner in San Francisco hired me when I was sleeping in my car, fresh out of college, with my father's funeral bills crushing me. He didn't just give me a job. He taught me the business. Believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. He turned around. And because you remind me of my father, what he could have been if someone had given him a chance. Tears burned my eyes. I tried to blink them away, but they spilled over anyway. I'll do it, I whispered. Not for me, for these men. To prove they're not disposable. Alex smiled, a real smile this time, full of warmth. He extended his hand. Then we have a deal. I stood up, shook his hand. His grip was firm, final, like a promise sealed. He walked to the door, then stopped. One more thing. The name. What will you call it? I thought about the men upstairs. Roy with his marine tattoo. Ron who cried over breakfast. Aaron fighting every day to stay sober. All of them deserving more than the world had given them. Kind helpings. I said, my voice thick with emotion. Because everyone deserves a second chance. Alex's eyes glistened. Perfect. I'll have my lawyers draw up the papers. We start renovations Monday. He left, and I stood there alone in Sister Agnes's tiny office staring at my hands. These hands that had chopped onions in million-dollar kitchens. These hands that Connor had called a burden. These hands that were about to build something that mattered. Maybe Connor was wrong. Maybe I wasn't a burden. Maybe at 68 I was just getting started. 42 years ago, I opened my first restaurant with $3,000 and a prayer. Now at 68, I was doing it again, backed by a billionaire and a second chance at life. 2 months after shaking hands with Alex Donovan, I stood in the middle of 2,800 square feet of raw potential. The previous owner had left behind grease-stained walls, broken equipment, and the ghost of failed dreams. But I could see past all that. I could see what it would become. The contractor, a weathered man named Miguel, handed me blueprints. "Mr. Parker, where do you want the prep stations?" I walked him through the kitchen layout, pointing to corners and measuring distances with my hands. "Prep here close to the walk-in. Grill station there with clear sightlines to the pass. Dishwasher in the back corner, give them ventilation and dignity. Nobody should feel like they're working in a cave." Miguel raised an eyebrow. "You've done this before." "Once or twice." By mid-November, the renovations were humming. New floors, fresh paint, stainless steel counters that gleamed under industrial lights. I was there every day watching it take shape, and for the first time since Catherine died, I felt like I belonged somewhere. But a restaurant isn't just walls and equipment. It's people. I posted a hiring notice at St. Vincent's. Within a day, I had 12 applications. Most were handwritten on torn notebook paper. Some had spelling mistakes. All of them broke my heart. Roy Jenkins was first in line for interviews. He sat across from me in the unfinished dining room, his marine tattoo visible under his rolled-up sleeve. "Gary, I'm 62 years old. Nobody hires guys like me anymore. I've been applying for 6 months. Nothing. Roy, I'm 68. We'll be the oldest staff in Portland. And the best." His eyes went wet. "You mean it? You showed up at the shelter every morning, on time, sober, respectful. That's all I need to know. You start Monday, $18 an hour, tips meal every shift, and a bus pass. Welcome to Second Helpings." He shook my hand so hard I thought he'd break it. Ron Foster came next, the construction worker who'd cried over my breakfast. 58, with calloused hands and a quiet voice. "Mr. Parker, I used to manage crews, built half the bridges in this county. Then I got injured, couldn't work, lost everything. If you give me a shot in the kitchen, sous chef position, you'll run prep and help me with menu execution. Same pay, same benefits. I won't let you down. I know you won't." Aaron Blake was the hardest interview. 34 years old, 90 days sober, hands that still shook when he was nervous. "Mr. Parker, I have to be honest. I've got a record, possession. I've been clean 90 days, but, Aaron, I don't care about your past. I care about your future. Busser position. You'll clear tables, help with dishes, learn the flow. Show up on time, stay sober, and I'll teach you everything I know. Chelzu." He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Thank you for this chance. I won't mess up. I believe you." December was training. I had Roy, Ron, and Aaron in the kitchen every day, teaching them the basics most culinary schools skip. You and knife skills aren't about speed. I told them, demonstrating on an onion. They're about respect. For the food, for yourself. Every cut matters. Roy practiced until his onions were perfect dice. Ron learned to break down a chicken in under 2 minutes. Aaron memorized the timing on every dish. When to fire the sides, when to plate, when to call for pickup. We built the menu together. Comfort food elevated with technique and heart. Tom's beef stew became our signature, named after the moment in the shelter when I'd realized food could heal. Braised short ribs with root vegetables, red wine reduction, fresh herbs. Simple ingredients, perfect execution. Granny's mac and cheese, Roy's grandmother's recipe with Gruyere and a panko crust. Sunday roast, Ron's childhood favorite reimagined with garlic mashed potatoes and caramelized carrots. Every dish had a story. Every dish had soul. In early January, I hung the wall of thanks. Photos of our staff with handwritten stories beneath. Roy Jenkins, line cook, Marine Corps veteran, loves his grandkids, makes the best mac and cheese in Portland. Ron Foster, sous chef, built bridges for 30 years, now building dreams. Aaron Blake Busser, 90 days sober and counting, working toward a culinary degree. Roy stood in front of that wall for 10 minutes, just staring at his photo. "Nobody's ever honored me like this," he whispered. "You've earned it," I said. The week before opening, I held our first staff meal. We sat together at table 7, the same table where Alex had eaten my beef stew, and I served them the menu we'd built. Roy took a bite of his mac and cheese and laughed. "My grandma would be so proud." Ron raised his water glass. To second helpings and second chances, we all clinked glasses. Even Aaron managed to smile. At the end of the meal, I handed out paychecks advance payment for the first 2 weeks. Roy opened his envelope, stared at the number, and his face crumpled. "Gary Katu," he choked out. "I haven't earned an honest paycheck in 2 years. You gave it back to me." I gripped his shoulder. "You earned it yourself, Roy. I just gave you the kitchen." February 1st. Opening day. The line wrapped around the building before we'd even unlocked the doors. Alex arrived in a tailored suit, looking every inch the billionaire investor he was. But when he saw the crowd, he grinned like a kid. "Rad?" he asked. I tied on my chef's coat, white-pressed with second helpings, embroidered on the chest. Behind me, Roy, Ron, and Aaron stood at their stations, nervous but steady. "Let's cook," I said. Alex opened the doors. The line wrapped around the building, 40 seats inside. Nearly 200 people waiting outside. I was 68 years old, and I had never felt more alive. I stood at the pass, the narrow counter between the kitchen and the dining room, watching the crowd through the front window. Young couples, families, office workers still in suits, all of them here because they'd heard something special was happening tonight. Behind me, the kitchen buzzed with focused chaos. Roy worked the grill. Ron handled prep. Aaron restocked plates and wiped surfaces. We had practiced for weeks, but practice never fully prepares you for the real thing. I clapped my hands once. "All right, team." They gathered around me, my crew of second chances. "Tonight, we're not just cooking food," I said. "We're proving something. To this city. To ourselves. We're showing that dignity matters. That skill matters. That people deserve more than they've been given." I met their eyes one by one. Roy, Ron, Aaron. "You ready?" Roy grinned, gripping his spatula. "Let's show them what old guys can do." Aaron nodded, calm and focused. "Ready, chef?" Ron cracked his knuckles. "Born ready. Then let's cook." Alex stepped into the doorway, sleeves rolled up, looking more like a server than a billionaire. "First seating's ready. 32 guests. Orders coming in." The printer started chattering. Tickets spilled out, table numbers, dishes, modifications. I grabbed the first one. 2, Tom's beef. Stew 1, Granny's mac, 1 Sunday roast. Fire table 3. "Yes," Chef Roy called. And just like that, we were moving. The first hour disappeared in a blur. Orders came faster than expected. The dining room filled with laughter, conversation, and the sound of forks on plates. Through the window, I watched faces change with the first bite, the moment when food becomes memory. At table 5, an elderly woman closed her eyes after tasting her stew. When she opened them, they were filled with tears. Her companion leaned toward her, worried, but she waved him off and smiled. "This tastes exactly like my grandmother used to make," she told the server, loud enough for me to hear. A young couple at table 2 photographed every dish, not for show, but to remember. At table 7, Alex's table, a group of businessmen ate in silence at first. Then I caught fragments of conversation. "We need to bring clients here. Best meal I've had in Portland. How is this place not famous yet?" Then table 12 caught my attention. A young woman sat alone, phone propped against her water glass. She filmed herself eating, speaking easily to the camera. I barely noticed until Alex appeared beside me, smiling wide. "Gary," he said, "do you know who that is?" "A customer. That's Megan Brooks, food blogger, 500,000 followers." My stomach dropped. "Should I?" "No," he said. "Don't change a thing. Just cook." So I did. When her order came up, Tom's beef stew with extra bread, I plated it exactly like every other dish. With care. With pride. 10 minutes later, Alex showed me his phone. Hashtag second helpings PDX. Portland's best-kept secret. Chef Gary is extraordinary. Every dish tells a story. Every bite heals something. Go now. Over 100,000 views already, Alex said quietly. You're going viral. I looked at the screen, then back at the kitchen. Roy flipped steaks like clockwork. Ron plated sides with precision. Aaron cleared tables with professional focus. Good, I said. We're ready. By 9, we'd served everyone. The dining room emptied. The kitchen quieted except for running water and clinking dishes. Roy leaned against the counter, drenched in sweat and smiling. We did it. Ron scrubbed pans slower now. Hardest I've worked in years. Best night of my life. Aaron sat on an overturned bucket, hands shaking not from cravings, but exhaustion and pride. Thank you, chef. For everything. You earned it, I said. Alex joined us, loosened his tie, grabbed a towel, and started drying plates. Good opening, he asked. I looked around. The empty ticket rail, clean plates. My crew. Yeah, I said. A very good opening. And then it hit me. For the first time in months, I hadn't thought about Connor once. Not during service, not during prep. Not even now. I'd been too busy building something new. Maybe that's healing. Not forgetting, just moving forward. The next morning, I woke to 17 voicemails. The reservation system had crashed. The website couldn't handle the traffic. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. I stepped out of my small apartment above the restaurant. Alex insisted I take it, and checked the messages. The last voicemail was from Sister Agnes. Gary, turn on Channel 8. You're on the morning news. I turned on the TV and froze. There I was standing in my chef's coat in the kitchen. The headline read, From Shelter to Success, Portland Chef's Second Chance. I sat down staring at the screen. 68 years old. 4 months ago, I'd been sleeping in a shelter. Now I was on the morning news. Success has a sound. It's the chime of reservation notifications, the laughter at packed tables, and the silence of a past that's finally stopped chasing you. By March 2nd, helpings had a 2-week wait list. Food bloggers kept showing up unannounced, filming our dining room, interviewing Roy while he flipped steaks. The Portland Tribune ran a feature, 68-year-old chef's second act becomes city's hottest table. April brought numbers I hadn't dared hope for. 185,000 in revenue. We'd hit break-even in 3 months, something Alex said most restaurants took 2 years to do. May came with awards. Portland Monthly named us Best New Restaurant. The James Beard Foundation sent a scout. Roy cried when I showed him the article with his photo in it, captioned, Former Marine Finds Purpose at Second Helpings. By June, we were pulling in $240,000 a month. Steady profit. Real money. I moved out of the apartment above the restaurant into a small place 6 blocks away. 1-bedroom hardwood floors, a kitchen window that caught morning light. My first real home in 9 months. I opened a savings account. Put away $10,000 the first month. Another $12,000 the second. For the first time since Catherine died, I felt like I had a future. August arrived with the kind of heat that makes Portland natives complain. I was sitting in a coffee shop, 3 blocks from the restaurant, reading the Portland Food Industry Newsletter, a trade publication I'd subscribed to years ago and never canceled. Most of it was boring. New health code updates, industry trends, restaurant openings and closings, and then I saw it. Parker Dining Group struggles. Continue 4 locations closed. My heart stopped. Parker. That was Connor's chain. The restaurants I'd built. The ones I'd handed him when I retired 5 years ago, thinking he'd honor what I'd created. I scanned the article with shaking hands. Parker Dining Group, once a Portland staple under founder Gary Parker, has closed 4 of its 6 remaining locations amid mounting financial troubles. Industry sources cite declining food quality, health code violations, and mismanagement. I set the newsletter down, picked up my phone, opened Google. On Parker's Kitchen reviews. The results made my stomach turn. Yelp 2.5 stars. It used to be 4.5 when I ran it. The reviews were brutal. What happened to this place used to be amazing. Now it's overpriced garbage. He got food poisoning here last month. Manager didn't even apologize. Never coming back. Dirty kitchen, rude staff, avoid at all costs. I kept scrolling. News articles popped up. Health code violations at 2 locations. A lawsuit from a customer who'd gotten sick. Photos of empty dining rooms that used to be packed every night. Connor was destroying everything I'd built. I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Anger. Not the hot, impulsive kind. The cold, calculating kind. The kind that makes you think clearly. He'd thrown me out like trash, called me a burden, a liability. And now he was running my restaurants into the ground, destroying the legacy I'd spent 40 years building, ruining the lives of employees I'd trained and cared about. Part of me wanted to watch him fail, to let him crash and burn the way he'd burned me. But another part, the part that still remembered teaching him to crack eggs at 6 years old, that remembered him crying in my arms when Catherine died. That part wanted to save what I'd built, not for him, for the people who depended on those restaurants, for the legacy Catherine and I had created together. And a third part, the part that had been growing stronger since I'd started cooking at St. Vincent's, wanted him to learn, to understand what he'd done, to face consequences. I didn't know which part would win. That night I was distracted during dinner service. Roy noticed first. Chef, you good. You've been staring at the past for 5 minutes. I'm fine, I lied. But I wasn't fine. And when Alex showed up for our weekly dinner, a tradition we'd kept since opening, he saw it immediately. Sirs Gary, you've been quiet all week. What's going on? I pulled out my phone, showed him the article, the reviews, the photos of closed locations. That's your son's company, he asked quietly. I nodded. It used to be mine. I handed it to him when I retired. And he's running it into bankruptcy. Alex studied the articles, his investor brain clearly processing numbers and timelines. How much trouble is he in? I don't know. But it's bad. 4 locations closed. That's not just poor management. That's catastrophic failure. Do you want to know more? I looked at him. What do you mean? I have resources, Gary. Private investigators, financial analysts. If you want to know exactly how bad it is, debts, liabilities, everything, I can find out. But I need to know something first. What? Are you ready to face your son again? The question hit me like a punch. Face Connor. The man who'd kicked me out. Who'd called me a burden. Who'd taken everything I'd built and destroyed it. Was I ready? I thought about the last 5 months. Sleeping in a shelter. Cooking with $4 of donated ingredients. Building second helpings from nothing. Proving I wasn't a liability. I thought about Roy, who'd gotten his first paycheck in 2 years because I'd given him a chance. I thought about Aaron, 90 days sober and counting, learning to be a professional because someone believed in him. I thought about Catherine and the promise I'd made to never tell Connor the truth about his father. And I thought about the restaurants Connor was destroying, the employees losing their jobs, the customers getting food poisoning, the legacy being buried under debt and negligence. Maybe it was time Connor learned what it meant to lose everything. Find out everything, I said. Alex pulled out his phone, already typing. I'll have a full report in 48 hours. Financial records, vendor contracts, employee complaints, legal issues, all of it. Why are you doing this? I asked. He looked up, his expression serious. Because you remind me of my father. And because sometimes the best way to teach someone is to let them see exactly what they've done wrong. But on your terms, Gary, not his. I nodded slowly. What do you have in mind? First, we find out how deep the hole is. Then we decide if we want to bury him in it, or pull him out and make him dig himself free. They say knowledge is power. I was about to learn every painful detail of my son's failure, and each one cut deeper than the last. 1 month after deciding to investigate, I stood in Alex's office on the 23rd floor of a downtown high-rise. The view stretched across the Willamette River, but I wasn't looking at the scenery. I was looking at the mahogany conference table covered in documents, financial reports, surveillance photos, vendor contracts, employee statements. It looked like a war room, because that's what it was. Alex's financial analyst, a sharp woman in her 30s named Sarah, had spent 4 weeks building the case. Now she stood at the head of the table presenting Connor's empire like a surgeon explaining a terminal diagnosis. Total debt $2.3 million. 4 locations closed. 2 remaining locations failing health inspections. Equipment leases unpaid. Employee wages delayed by 3 weeks. The bank is 90 days away from foreclosure. I stared at the numbers. They felt unreal. How had he let it get this bad? And there's this. Sarah continued sliding a photo across the table. It showed Connor's house, the house I'd helped him buy, the one he'd kicked me out of, with a foreclosure notice taped to the door. My chest tightened. Gary, Alex said quietly. You ready for the phone calls? I nodded. We'd planned this part carefully. I needed to hear it from the people who'd been hurt, not from reports, from real voices. The first call was to Pete Moretti, 60 years old, Italian, built like a truck. He'd been my produce supplier for 30 years before Connor was even born. I dialed his number. He answered on the second ring. Moretti Produce. Pete, it's Gary Parker. Silence. Then, Gary Parker. Holy hell, where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for months. Long story, Pete. I'm calling about the Parker's Kitchen account. How's Connor been treating you? The explosion was immediate. How's he been treating me, Gary? We had to cut him off. 4 months of unpaid invoices. He owes us $40,000. $40,000. We've been in business 40 years. We've never had to sue a client before. But Connor, he won't return our calls, won't answer emails, nothing. My stomach turned. He's not ordering from you anymore. He switched to some cheap frozen garbage from a national distributor. No quality, no care, nothing like what you taught him, Gary. It's breaking my heart watching him destroy what you built. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry, Pete. You deserved better. It's not your fault. But Gary, wherever you've been, I hope you're doing okay. Because that kid of yours is drowning. We said goodbye. I set the phone down, hands shaking. Alex handed me a second number. Emily Richards, your former sous chef. I dialed. She answered cautiously. Hello. Emily, it's Gary Parker. A sharp intake of breath. Then quietly, Mr. Parker. Oh my God. I thought everyone thought you just disappeared. Are you okay? I'm fine, Emily. Better than fine. But I'm calling about Parker's Kitchen. You're not working there anymore. I quit 3 months ago. Her voice hardened. Connor's a nightmare, Mr. Parker. He yells at everyone, humiliates staff in front of customers, cuts corners on everything. The kitchen's falling apart. The food's garbage. It's not the restaurant you built. It's toxic. Emily, I'm so sorry. Don't apologize. You treated us like family. Connor treats us like disposable labor. Half the original staff is gone. The ones who stayed are only there because they can't find other jobs. She paused. Mr. Parker, whatever happened between you and Connor, I don't know the details. But I want you to know we all miss you. And we all see what he's doing to your legacy. The call ended. I sat there staring at the phone. Alex waited. Finally, I looked up. It's worse than I thought, I said. He's not just failing at business. He's destroying people's lives. Pete's been a supplier for 30 years. Emily worked for me for 15. Connor owes them money, respect, decency, and he's giving them nothing. There's more, Sarah said, pulling up another document. The 2 remaining locations are only operating because Connor's delaying vendor payments and skipping health code repairs. The bank is ready to foreclose on everything, the restaurants, the equipment, even his house. I stood up, walked to the window. The city lights blurred through the glass. 40 years, I whispered. I spent 40 years building something that mattered. Relationships with suppliers, training staff, creating a reputation, and he destroyed it in 5. Alex appeared beside me. Gary, what do you want to do? I turned to face him. I don't want revenge, Alex. I want justice. And I want him to understand what he's lost. Not just the money, the trust, the relationships, the things that actually matter. There's a way to do that, Alex said, but it requires capital and timing. I'm listening. He walked to his laptop, pulled up a document. The bank is about to sell Connor's debt portfolio to a collection agency. They'll buy it for pennies on the dollar, probably 60 cents per dollar of debt. Then they'll foreclose on everything, auction it off, and Connor loses it all. No second chances, no lessons learned. Just destruction. What's the alternative? Alex met my eyes. We buy it first, before the collection agency. You become Connor's creditor. You own his debt. You control his future. The words hung in the air like smoke. How much? I asked. 1.4 million. For 2.3 million in debt. I did the math. If I bought the debt, I'd own everything, the restaurants, the equipment, the leases, and Connor would owe me instead of the bank. What happens after we buy it? I asked. That's up to you, Alex said. You can foreclose, take everything, walk away. Or, he paused, you can make him earn it back, on your terms. Make him prove he's learned something. I thought about Connor, about the boy who used to help me chop vegetables, about the man who'd called me a burden and thrown me out into the rain, about the promise I'd made to Catherine. I don't want to destroy him, I said slowly. I want him to understand what it means to lose everything. And then, if he's willing to learn, I want to give him a chance to earn it back. Alex smiled. Then let's make him an offer he can't refuse. Son, you can't fight a war alone. Fortunately, I'd spent 6 months building an army of believers. 2 weeks after deciding to buy Connor's debt, Alex arranged a private investor dinner at Second Helpings. After hours. Just 5 men, a 6-course tasting menu, and the kind of money that could change everything. I stood in the kitchen with Roy, Ron, and Aaron prepping dishes I'd spent days perfecting. This wasn't regular service. This was a pitch. And my food had to speak louder than any words. Roy looked up from searing scallops. Boss, these are rich people. Why are we cooking for them? Because I need them to taste what we do here. I said, plating roasted beets with goat cheese and candied walnuts. Food is my resume, Roy. If they don't believe in the food, they won't believe in me. They'd be idiots not to, Aaron said quietly from the dish station. I smiled. Let's make sure they're not idiots. The private dining room glowed warm under Edison bulbs. 5 men sat around the table, all 50s and 60s, all in tailored suits that cost more than most people's cars. Alex sat at the head, looking every inch the billionaire he was. I recognized one of them, Richard Blackwell, real estate mogul. Owned half the commercial properties in downtown Portland. If he was here, Alex had pulled serious strings. The first course went out. Butternut squash soup with sage oil and crispy prosciutto. Simple, seasonal, perfect. I watched through the kitchen window as they tasted it. Conversation stopped. Spoons moved slowly. One man closed his eyes. Richard set his spoon down and looked toward the kitchen. Our eyes met through the window. He nodded once. By the third course, pan-seared duck breast with cherry gastrique, Alex began his pitch. "Gentlemen," he said, standing. "6 months ago, the man cooking your meal tonight was living in a homeless shelter. No money, no home, no prospects, just skill, humility, and a refusal to quit." The investors looked toward the kitchen. I stayed focused on plating the next course. Today, Alex continued, his restaurant generates $240,000 a month in revenue, 3-week waitlist, national media coverage, and a Michelin scout scheduled to visit next month. He paused, letting that sink in. Tomorrow, he's going to acquire his son's failing restaurant empire, 6 locations, $2.3 million in debt, and teach that boy how to run a business the right way. With integrity, with care, with the values that built this industry. Richard leaned forward. "What do you need from us, Alex?" $1.4 million. Cash, to buy the debt portfolio from the bank before it goes to a collection agency. Gary becomes the creditor. He controls the terms. He decides the future. "And what's our return?" another investor asked. "Equity in the new holding company. When Gary turns those restaurants around, and he will, you'll own a piece of Portland's next restaurant empire. But more than that, you'll be part of a story worth telling. A man who lost everything and rebuilt it. A father who taught his son the hardest lesson of all." Alex looked toward the kitchen again. "Gary, come out here." I wiped my hands on my apron and walked into the dining room. 5 sets of eyes studied me, wealthy, powerful men who could write a check and change my life. "Gentlemen," I said, voice steady despite my racing heart. "I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing this because good businesses deserve good stewards. My son forgot that restaurants aren't just about profit margins. They're about nourishing human souls, feeding people with respect, treating employees with dignity." I looked at Richard. "I built those restaurants over 40 years. I trained the staff. I cultivated the suppliers. I created relationships that mattered. And my son destroyed them in 5 years because he forgot why we do this work. I'm going to remind him. And if he can't learn, I'll find someone who can." Silence. Then Richard spoke. "Alex, if you vouch for this man, I'm in." 500,000. Another investor raised his hand. 750. 500. 1 million. 650. In 5 minutes, they'd committed $3.2 million. More than we needed. More than I dared hope for. The next week was a blur of legal paperwork. Samuel Crawford, Alex's corporate attorney, sharp-eyed and methodical, drafted the LLC formation, documents the debt purchase agreement, the terms of ownership. "This is airtight," Samuel said, sliding the final contract across his desk. "Once the bank accepts, you own everything. The debt, the liens, the equipment, even the mortgage on his house." I signed my name. Gary Parker. The signature that used to mean something, That would mean something again. Alex submitted the offer: 1.4 million cash for 2.3 million in debt, 60 cents on the dollar. The bank had been sitting on bad debt for months, watching Connor's empire crumble. They'd take it. 1 week later, during dinner service, Alex's phone rang. He stepped into my office, closed the door. I kept cooking, but my hands were shaking. 5 minutes later, he emerged, face unreadable. "Gary, step outside." We stood in the alley behind the restaurant, the same alley where I used to take breaks during the early days, when success was still just hope. "The bank accepted," Alex said quietly. "As of 5 p.m. today, you legally own your son's debt. Every dollar, every asset, every last chance he has." I leaned against the brick wall, breathing slowly. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now Samuel sends the foreclosure notice. Certified mail. Connor will receive it in 3 days. And then—" Alex paused. "Then you decide how this ends." That night I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the legal documents with my signature. Tomorrow Samuel would send the letter. Connor would open an envelope that would change his life, and he wouldn't know it was from me until it was too late to run. I thought about Catherine, about the promise I'd made, about the secret I'd kept for 35 years. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," I whispered to the empty room. "But he needs to learn, and I'm the only one who can teach him." I picked up my phone, texted Alex, "Send the letter." The next morning, I sat in Samuel Crawford's office, staring at the final foreclosure documents. My hand shook as I picked up the pen. "Mr. Parker," Samuel said quietly, "once you sign these, you legally own Connor Parker's debt. All $2.3 million. He'll have 30 days to pay in full or face foreclosure of all remaining assets, restaurants, equipment, property liens, everything." I signed my name. The ink felt heavier than it should. 30 days, I said. That's more notice than he gave me. Samuel sealed the documents in a manila envelope, then prepared the certified letter. I watched him write the address in careful block letters. "To Connor Parker, CEO, Parker Dining Group. This will be delivered tomorrow morning," Samuel said. "Signature required." I stared at the envelope. Connor would open it at his desk, the desk in the office I'd built, with his morning coffee, probably distracted by emails or vendor complaints or whatever crisis was burning that day, and then he'd read it. His face would go white. The numbers would blur. $2.3 million. 30 days. Foreclosure. He'd call his lawyer in a panic. Maybe Ashley would cry when he told her. Maybe, just maybe, he'd remember the night he kicked me out. The rain. The $500. The cold dismissal. Maybe he'd finally understand what I felt. After leaving Samuel's office, I drove across town. I hadn't planned it, but my hands turned the wheel almost on their own, and suddenly I was parked outside the original Parker's kitchen, the one I'd opened in 1982 with $3,000 and a dream. It was closed now. Dark windows. "For lease" sign taped to the door. Weeds growing through cracks in the parking lot. I got out of the car and stood there, hands in my pockets, staring at the building like it might speak to me. 1982. Opening day. Catherine beside me, pregnant with Connor, her hand on her belly. "We're going to build something beautiful, Gary." Connor, at 4 years old, standing on a milk crate in the kitchen, wearing a toy chef's hat, helping me chop carrots with a plastic knife. Connor at 12, flipping his first egg without breaking the yolk, grinning like he'd won the lottery. "Dad, did you see that perfect?" Connor at 32, me handing him the keys. "It's yours now, son. Take care of it." I leaned against the car, tears streaming down my face. I built this for him. I whispered to no one. Every brick, every recipe, every relationship. And he destroyed it. That night I returned to second helpings after closing. Alex was waiting in my office, his expression serious in a way I'd never seen before. Gary, before you confront Connor, there's something you need to know. About me. About Catherine. About Connor. I sat down slowly. What is it? Alex took a deep breath. 35 years ago, I met a woman at a charity gala in San Francisco. She was beautiful, lonely, married to a chef who worked 80 hours a week and came home too tired to talk. We had an affair. It lasted 3 months. My chest tightened. Her name was Catherine. Alex continued, voice cracking. Your wife. And Connor. Connor is my biological son. The room went silent. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a car alarm chirped. I stared at Alex. He stared back, bracing for my reaction. I know, I said quietly. Alex blinked. What? Catherine told me before she died. 3 years ago, in the hospital. Shai, you knew, his voice rose. And you still raised him, knowing he wasn't yours. He needed a father, Alex. You weren't there. I was. I leaned forward, hands clasped. I changed his diapers at 2 a.m. I taught him to ride a bike. I held him when his first girlfriend broke his heart. I taught him to cook, to run a business, to treat people with respect. Biology doesn't make a father. Showing up every day makes a father. Alex sat down heavily, rubbing his face. I didn't know she was pregnant. She never told me. By the time I found out years later through a friend, you were already raising him. He called you Dad. I had no right to interfere. You're right, you didn't. Does Connor know? Alex asked. No. Catherine made me promise never to tell him, and I keep my promises. Even after he threw you out, especially after. I stood up, walked to the window. Because he needs to learn he failed a father. Not learn about biology. If I tell him now, he'll use it as an excuse. Oh, Gary wasn't really my dad anyway. No. He needs to face what he did to the man who chose to love him. The man who could have walked away 1,000 times and didn't. Alex was quiet for a long time. Then, when we confront him, you stay silent about this, I said firmly. He faces what he did to me, to the restaurants, to the people who depended on him. The truth about biology can wait. Maybe forever. You're protecting him, Alex said softly. Even now. I'm protecting the lesson he needs to learn. There's a difference. The original Parker's kitchen looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I'd just grown too big to fit into the past anymore. I stood in the kitchen where I'd cooked my first meal as a restaurant owner 42 years ago. The equipment was outdated, now rusted griddle-dented pots, a walk-in that barely kept temperature. But I knew every inch of this space, every scratch on the counter, every stain on the floor. It was 7 a.m. Alex and I had the keys. I owned the property now, along with everything else Connor owed. We'd arrived early to prepare. I pulled ingredients from the cooler. Short ribs, root vegetables, red wine, fresh thyme. Catherine's recipe. The one she'd made when Connor was 8, and she'd gotten sick for the first time before the cancer, just a bad flu that had scared him. She'd made this stew to show him she was okay, that food could heal, that love could be tasted. Alex appeared in the doorway watching me work. You're really cooking, he asked. Not the smell will hit him when he walks in. I said, browning the meat. He'll remember before he sees me. This is psychological warfare. No. I stirred the pot, releasing the scent of caramelized onions and wine. It's a reminder of what love tastes like. Alex went back to the dining room, arranging documents on the table. Foreclosure notices, debt schedules, asset inventories. The evidence of Connor's failure organized like a prosecutor's case file. By 10:30, the stew was simmering. The restaurant smelled like childhood, like comfort, like everything Connor had destroyed. At 11 a.m. exactly, I heard a car pull up outside. What do you think Connor's reaction will be when he sees his father standing there? Will he break down? Will he get angry? Will he walk out? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know you're still here with me on this journey. And here's something else. After listening to this story so far on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this video? Leave your score in the comments below. Your feedback helps me create even better content for you. It truly means the world. A quick note before we go further. The story ahead contains some fictionalized elements and may not reflect real events entirely. If you prefer not to continue, feel free to stop here, no hard feelings. But if you're ready to see how this confrontation unfolds, stay with me. Because what happens next will change everything. Connor looked worse than I'd expected. 35 years old, but moving like a man twice that age. His suit was wrinkled, probably slept in. Dark circles under his eyes. Hair uncombed. This was a man who hadn't slept in days. Ashley was beside him, 8 months pregnant, gripping his arm like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Her face was pale, eyes red from crying. They walked into the dining room and froze. Alex stood at the head of the table, every inch the billionaire investor. Tailored suit, expensive watch. The kind of presence that makes people nervous just by existing. Mr. Donovan. Connor's voice cracked with hope. Thank God. I thought when we got the foreclosure notice I didn't know who owned the debt. But if it's you, we can work this out. I have projections, I have a turnaround plan. I'm not your creditor, Mr. Parker, Alex said coldly. Connor blinked. What, then, who? He is. I stepped out of the kitchen, carrying 2 bowls of beef stew. Steam rose from them, carrying that unmistakable scent, home memory Catherine. I set the bowls on the table, met Connor's eyes. Hello, Connor, Ashley. Dad made lunch. It's been a while. Connor went completely still. Not frozen, erased. Like someone had reached into his chest and stopped his heart mid-beat. His face drained of color. White. Then gray. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Dad, Ashley gasped, hand flying to her pregnant belly. Connor. Connor staggered backward, gripping the edge of a chair for balance. This isn't, you can't. Sit down, I said quietly. This is insane. Ashley's voice went shrill. You were homeless. You had nothing. This is some kind of Mrs. Parker. Alex's voice cut through the room like a blade. Your father-in-law owns $2.3 million of your debt. He owns your house. He owns your cars. He owns your restaurants. He owns every last chance you have. I suggest you show some respect before you lose that too. Ashley went silent, tears starting to stream down her face. Connor finally managed to move. He pulled out a chair, sat down heavily. Stared at me like I was a ghost. How? He whispered. I placed a manila folder on the table in front of him. I own your debt, Connor. All of it. $2.3 million. I bought it last month. The bank was very happy to sell, but you had nothing. You were sleeping in a shelter. Mine, I was never homeless in spirit, son. Just homeless in a dress. I pulled out a chair across from him. While you were destroying what I built something new. I slid a tablet across the table. Second helpings glowed on the screen, 5-star reviews, revenue reports, photos of a packed dining room, articles calling it Portland's best new restaurant. This is what happens when you cook with integrity instead of greed, I said. When you treat people with respect instead of contempt. When you remember that restaurants aren't just about profit margins, they're about nourishing souls. Connor stared at the tablet, then at me. I don't understand. You will. I gestured to the bowl in front of him. Now eat, both of you, before we discuss your futures. Connor looked at the bowl like it might bite him. His hand shook as he picked up the spoon. lifted it to his mouth, tasted, and broke. Tears streamed down his face immediately. Not quiet tears. Gut-wrenching sobs he tried to swallow back and couldn't. This is... His voice cracked. This is Mom's recipe, from when I was 8, when she got sick the first time. She made this to show me she was okay. I wanted to remind you what love tastes like, Connor, I said quietly. Before we talk about consequences, he set the spoon down, hands covering his face. Ashley reached for him, but he pulled away, shoulders shaking. I waited. Let him cry. Let him remember. Let him feel the weight of what he'd done. Finally, he looked up. Eyes red, face wet, voice barely above a whisper. What do you want from me? I want you to understand what you've lost, I said. Not just the business, not just the money, the relationships, the trust, the legacy your mother and I built. You threw it all away because you forgot what mattered. I'm sorry. The words sounded hollow, desperate. Dad, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I shouldn't have... Sorry doesn't pay debts, Alex said coldly. Sorry doesn't feed the employees you laid off. Sorry doesn't repay the vendors you stiffed. Connor turned to Alex, then back to me. Then what? What do you want? I leaned forward, placed both hands flat on the table. You have 2 choices, Connor. Only 2, and you have 5 minutes to pick. His face went pale again. What are the choices? I held his gaze. Let the silence stretch. Let him feel the weight of his own destruction pressing down. Destruction, I said, or redemption. The terms I was about to lay out would either destroy my son or rebuild him from rubble. The choice, as always, would be his. Connor's question hung in the air. What are the choices? I didn't repeat myself. I slid a thick contract across the table instead. You'll sign over 5 of your 6 restaurants to me, I said. Today, immediately. Connor stared at the document like it was a death sentence. You keep 1. This one. The original Parker's Kitchen. A flicker of hope crossed his face. But you won't run it, I continued. You'll work in it. The hope died. Work. What do you mean? Line cook. Minimum wage. 1 year. Silence. Ashley's hand went to her mouth. 5 a.m. shifts, I said. 6 days a week. You'll prep vegetables, scrub grills, take orders from anyone I put above you. You'll do the work you made other people do while you sat in an office making bad decisions. Connor's face went white. You want me to cook? I want you to remember what it means to serve instead of exploit, to create instead of consume, to earn respect instead of demand it. I leaned forward. If you complete the full year with humility and real skill, I'll return 2 locations to you. To manage, not own, under my supervision. But if you quit, complain, or fail, you lose this last location too. Everything becomes mine. And if I refuse... Connor's voice was barely audible. Option 2. I file foreclosure tomorrow. You declare bankruptcy. Lose everything anyway. I pulled out another folder. Plus, I have documentation of financial mismanagement, vendor fraud, employee wage theft. I will prosecute. Connor's hands started shaking. Your choice, son, 1 year of humility or 10 years explaining to a judge why you stole from your own company. Connor broke, not slowly, all at once. His face crumpled, tears streaming down his cheeks. He covered his mouth with one hand, shoulders shaking. Dad, His voice cracked. I'm sorry. I called you a burden. I threw you out in the rain with $500 and told you to disappear. I took everything you built, everything Mom and you created together, and I destroyed it. He looked up at me, eyes red. Why would you offer me a chance? Why not just end me? My own voice went thick. Because you're my son, Connor. He shook his head violently. I don't deserve to be your son. I paused. Let the words sit between us. Let him feel their weight. You're right, I said quietly. You don't. Not yet. He flinched like I'd hit him. But you can earn it back. One plate at a time. One shift at a time. That's what redemption means, Connor. It isn't given. It's earned through sweat and humility and proving you've learned what matters. Ashley spoke up, voice trembling. Mr. Parker, this is my fault too. I turned to her. She was crying now, hands on her pregnant belly. I pushed Connor to make you leave. My family, we'd lost everything in a bankruptcy 2 years ago. I panicked when I got pregnant. I thought we needed space, needed to cut expenses, needed. She sobbed. I was scared. But fear doesn't excuse cruelty. I'm sorry. I studied her, 28 years old, terrified, about to have a baby in a world that had just collapsed around her. You'll work too. Ashley, I said gentler now. Hostess position, same terms, same wage, same year. You'll greet every customer with respect. You'll learn that people aren't obstacles, they're the whole point. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Thank you, Dad. I'll do it, I promise. Alex stood then, commanding the room without raising his voice. Connor, let me tell you what I see from the outside, he said. I see a man who inherited an empire and convinced himself he built it. I see someone who valued a business degree over 42 years of master-level practice. I see someone who measured his father's worth in dollars and found him lacking. He paused, and for a split second I saw something flicker across his face, guilt, regret, something deep. He almost said more. I caught his eye, shook my head slightly. He changed direction. Don't spend your life regretting this moment. Sign the papers. Do the work. Become the man your father tried to raise you to be. Connor picked up the pen with shaking hands. I watched him sign document after document. Transfers of ownership, employment contracts, non-compete clauses. Every stroke of ink was a piece of his ego dying. When he finished, he set the pen down and looked at me. Dad, there's one more thing, the baby. What about it? We decided on the name months ago. Even after His voice broke. Even after I made you leave. Ashley spoke up. We're naming him Owen. Connor wiped his eyes. I almost named him Gary. After you. Even after throwing you out, part of me knew I'd made the worst mistake of my life. But I couldn't. It felt like I'd lost the right. I covered my face, shoulders shaking. 42 years of fatherhood, and he'd almost named his son after me despite everything. Behind me, I heard Alex turn away. When I glanced back, his eyes were wet too. His biological grandson named after the man who'd raised his son. I pulled myself together, stood up, walked around the table and placed both hands on Connor's shoulders. You start Monday, I said. 5 a.m., Second Helpings Kitchen. Bring good shoes, not designer brands. Real work boots. Kitchen is hard on old men like us, but it teaches things business school never could. Connor nodded, unable to speak. Go home. Get some rest. Say goodbye to the man you were. Because Monday morning, you become someone new. They left. Connor and Ashley walking out into the afternoon light. Defeated, but somehow lighter. Like the weight of pretending had finally been lifted. I stood at the window watching them drive away. Alex appeared beside me. You could have told him I'm his biological father. Why didn't you? Because today was about him learning he failed a father. Not about DNA. If I tell him now, it becomes a distraction. Maybe even an excuse. Oh, Gary wasn't really my dad anyway. I shook my head. No. He needs to face what he did to the man who chose to love him. When will you tell him? Maybe never. Maybe when he's strong enough to receive it without derailing his progress. Right now, he needs to learn humility. Everything else can wait. Alex was quiet for a long time. Then, "You're a better man than I could ever be." "No," I said. "I'm just a father, and that's enough." That night alone in my apartment, I stood by the window with a cup of coffee. I didn't drink. The city lights blurred through the glass. Monday, Connor would walk into my kitchen. He'd put on an apron, he'd take orders, he'd learn or he wouldn't. The hard part was starting now. Punishment was easy. Education was the real work, and I had 1 year to teach him what I couldn't in 35 years. 1 year to prove that redemption isn't a gift. It's a choice you make every single day. My son showed up at 5:02 a.m., 2 minutes late. In my kitchen, that might as well be an hour. Connor stepped through the back door of Second Helpings, looking like a man who hadn't slept. Dark circles, wrinkled clothes, the kind of exhaustion that comes from realizing your life just changed forever. I didn't yell, didn't need to. "You're late," I said. "It's only 2 minutes. In a kitchen, 2 minutes means burnt food and disappointed customers. Roy will show you prep." Connor opened his mouth to argue, closed it, nodded. First lesson learned, time matters. Roy Jenkins appeared from the walk-in cooler arms loaded with vegetables. 62 years old. Marine Corps veteran, former homeless. Now my most reliable line cook. "Morning, boss," he said to me. Then he looked at Connor. "You're with me, kid." Kid. Connor, 35 years old, MBA from Stanford, former CEO, was now taking orders from a man he would have never hired. A man he would have called unqualified, based on a resume alone. The irony wasn't lost on me, or Roy, or anyone else in that kitchen. "Grab an apron," Roy said. "Prep station's over here. You're peeling today. Onions, potatoes, carrots. We need 50 pounds of each before service starts at 11. Connor stared at the mountain of vegetables. 50 pounds. "You got a problem with that?" Roy asked, not unkindly. No problem." "Good. Get to work." I watched Connor pick up a peeler. His hands were soft. Office hands. Hands that had signed contracts and typed emails and never spent 8 hours doing manual labor. Within 20 minutes, his hands were cramping. I could see it in the way he kept flexing his fingers, trying to work out the pain. Roy noticed too. "You're slower than me, kid. And I'm 62. Connor gritted his teeth. Kept peeling. Sweat dripped down his face. His shirt stuck to his back. The kitchen was hot, always hot, and there was no air conditioning back here. Just industrial fans that barely moved the air. I stayed at the pass, prepping for lunch service, but I watched him. Watched him struggle. Watched him realize what I'd done for 42 years. What his mother had done. What every person in this industry does. Because they love the work. Not because it's easy. At 8:30, Connor's phone rang. He pulled it from his pocket, saw Ashley's name, and went pale. "Connor." Her voice came through the speaker, panicked and breathless. "My water just broke. The baby, I need you. Now." Connor dropped the peeler. "I have to go. Right now. Finish prep first," I said calmly. 30 minutes. He spun around, eyes wide with disbelief. "My wife is having our child, and she'll still be having it in 30 minutes, I said. "Your team depends on you finishing your station. Complete your work, then go." "This is insane." "No." I walked over to him, looked him in the eye. "This is responsibility. Aaron can cover your station once you finish what you started, but you don't leave your team scrambling, not for anything. That's what it means to be part of something bigger than yourself." Connor's jaw clenched. His hands shook, anger, fear, frustration, all rolled into one. But he picked up the peeler, and he worked, faster than I'd seen him move all morning. Hands flying through onions and potatoes, ignoring the cramps, ignoring the phone vibrating in his pocket, with updates from Ashley's sister. 28 minutes later, he finished. Roy inspected the work, nodded. "Good. Now go. And congratulations, kid." "Aaron," I called. "Take over Connor's station. Aaron appeared, gave Connor a nod. Go be with your wife, man. Connor looked at me. Something passed between us, understanding maybe. Or just exhaustion. Thank you, he said quietly. 5 a.m. tomorrow. Don't be late. He ran. That evening, I drove to the hospital with containers of food I'd made during the dinner rush. Real food. Not hospital cafeteria garbage. Connor was in the waiting room, hands covered in small cuts and burns from the morning's work. He looked up when I walked in. Dad, you came. Of course I came. You're my son. He's my grandson. His eyes went wet. He stood up, and for a moment I thought he might hug me. But he just nodded. Ashley's still in labor. It's been hours. First babies take time. Here. I handed him the containers. Make sure she eats when she can. She'll need her strength. An hour later, a nurse came out. Mr. Parker, you can come meet your son now. Owen Parker was 7 pounds 3 ounces. Healthy lungs, perfect fingers, a shock of dark hair. He was wrapped in a hospital blanket, eyes squeezed shut, making small noises that weren't quite cries. Connor held him like he was made of glass. Ashley was exhausted hair stuck to her forehead with sweat but smiling. Dad, Connor said, do you want to hold him? I stepped forward, took the baby carefully. He was so small, so impossibly small, and I broke. Tears streamed down my face as I looked at this tiny person, my grandson, my son's son, the next generation of a family that had almost destroyed itself. Hello, Owen, I whispered. I'm your grandfather. Your father is learning what it means to build something that lasts. And I'm going to make sure you grow up in a world where you understand that too. Connor watched me, and I saw something in his face I hadn't seen in years. Humility, gratitude, understanding. Before I left, I pulled Connor aside in the hallway. I'm hard on you because the world is harder, I said. But I'm still your father, and I'm proud you finished your shift this morning. That took strength. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. You made the right one. I started to walk away, then stopped. Tomorrow, 5 a.m., don't be late. Connor's voice stopped me. Yes, chef. Not dad. Chef. For the first time, he was accepting the hierarchy. Accepting that in the kitchen, I wasn't his father. I was his teacher. His boss. The man he had to prove himself to. I turned back. Looked at him holding his newborn son. 1 day down, I said quietly. 364 to go. And then we'll see if you've earned the right to call yourself a father. 6 months in, my son was starting to look like a cook. But I needed to know if he was becoming a man of character. The universe was about to test him. Connor arrived at 4:55. 5 minutes early. Every single day for the past month. His knife skills had improved. Not perfect, but competent. He could break down a chicken in under 3 minutes. Now prep 50 pounds of vegetables without complaining, work a station during lunch rush without falling behind. But the real change wasn't technical. It was how he treated people. I watched from my office as Connor showed Marcus, a 25-year-old kid we'd hired from the shelter last month, how to dice onions properly. Patient, encouraging. The way I used to teach him when he was young. And keep your fingers curled, Connor was saying. The knife rocks, see you're not chopping. You're guiding. Marcus nodded, trying again. Connor smiled when he got it right. Roy appeared beside me. Kids coming along, boss? Really cares now? You think so. I know so. He stayed late last Tuesday to help Marcus practice his stations. Didn't ask for overtime, just did it. Aaron spoke up from the grill. He helped me last month, too. When I almost... He paused. When I had a rough day, talked me through it. Made sure I got home safe. I nodded slowly. The staff respected Connor now. Not because he used to be their boss, because he'd earned it. That afternoon, Connor was taking out trash behind the restaurant when a man in an expensive suit approached him. I was in the office, but I could see them through the window. The body language. The way Connor stopped, surprised. I didn't go outside, but I watched. That night, Connor found me in the office, reviewing invoices. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." He sat down across from me, hands fidgeting. "Someone offered me a partnership today. Chad Brennan. We used to work together. He's starting a new restaurant group. Upscale, exclusive, and he offered me $200,000 up front, 50% equity. Said I could be in charge again. Build something of my own." I set down my pen. "What did you tell him?" "That I needed to think about it." He looked up. "Should I take it?" I studied him. This was the moment, the test I'd been waiting for. "Do you want to learn to run before you can walk again?" I asked. "I don't know. Part of me wants to prove I can succeed on my own terms, that I learned something from all this. Nobody succeeds alone, Connor. I didn't rebuild alone. I had Alex, Roy, Ron, Aaron, Sister Agnes, a whole community of people who believed in me when I had nothing. Success is never solitary." I leaned forward. "The question isn't whether you can succeed. It's who you want to succeed with. People who care about you or people who see you as a transaction. What would you do?" "I can't tell you. This is your test, not mine. Whatever you choose, you'll live with the consequences." The next morning, I had business at the bank across the street from a coffee shop. Pure coincidence. Or maybe not. Maybe I knew Connor was meeting Chad there at 10 a.m. Through the window, I watched them sit down. Watched Chad slide papers across the table. Contracts, probably. Connor picked them up, read them, set them down, shook his head. Chad's face went red. He gestured angrily. Connor said something I couldn't hear, but his posture was firm, resolute. He stood up, extended his hand for a handshake Chad didn't return, and walked out. I ducked into the bank, heart pounding. Watched Connor walk past on the sidewalk heading back toward Second Helpings. His shoulders were straight. His pace was steady. He'd chosen. Back at the restaurant, I pretended I'd been there all morning. Connor came in through the back, tied on his apron, and went straight to his station. Roy caught my eye, raised an eyebrow. I shook my head slightly. "Not yet." At the end of service, Roy approached me in the office. "Boss, the 1-year mark is next month." "I'm aware. You gonna give him those restaurants back like you promised?" I looked through the window at Connor. He was cleaning his station, methodical and thorough, teaching Marcus how to properly sanitize a cutting board. "If he deserves it," I said. "We'll see." 1 year ago, I told my son forgiveness wasn't free. Tonight, I was ready to give my answer. The original Parker's Kitchen looked like it had 30 years ago. I'd spent the last 6 months restoring it, new floors, fresh paint equipment that worked. The dining room glowed warm under Edison bulbs, tables set with real linens and my mother's old china. This wasn't just dinner. It was a ceremony. Connor and Ashley arrived first, Owen toddling between them. 1 year old, learning to walk. Grabbing everything within reach with sticky hands. Alex came next, wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than most people's cars. But tonight, he wasn't a billionaire. He was family. Roy, Ron, and Aaron filed in the men who'd watched Connor transform from entitled CEO to humble line cook. Sister Agnes came too, the woman who'd first given me hope when I had nothing. And in the corner, quiet and dignified, sat Florence Donovan, Alex's mother, 85 years old. She'd insisted on coming, though she tired easily these days. We sat. We ate. Food I'd cooked myself, the menu Connor and I had built together over the past year. And then I stood. So 1 year ago, I told Connor that forgiveness isn't free, that he'd have to earn it. Not with words, with actions. Connor's hands gripped his napkin. Ashley reached for his arm. He worked 365 days, scrubbed floors, burned his hands, swallowed his pride. He showed up even when his body ached, even when his ego screamed to quit. I paused, looked at my son. But that's not why I forgive him today. Connor's eyes went wide. Shaktitav. 2 weeks ago, I watched him teach a new cook a kid from the streets, with patience I'd never seen in him before. I watched him give that kid the same second chance he'd been given. I watched him choose to lift others up instead of climb over them. My voice cracked. That's why I forgive you, Connor. Not because you suffered, because you learned to serve. I pulled a folder from beside my chair, slid the papers across the table. As promised, I'm returning 2 locations to you. Not as a gift, as something earned. You'll manage them. I'll advise. Alex will oversee finances, but they're yours to run. Prove you learned the lessons. Connor stared at the documents. Tears streamed down his face. Dad, I don't know what to say. Mom, say you'll never forget what it felt like to earn back what you lost. Say you'll teach Owen. I reached over, touched my grandson's soft hair. That respect is earned, not inherited. I promise, Connor choked out. On everything, I promise. Later after the meal, Alex pulled me aside in the kitchen. Doesn't it bother you? He asked quietly. That I'm his biological father. That you did all the hard work, and I get to watch the victory. You gave him DNA, I said. I gave him skinned knees and bedtime stories. Which one makes a father? Alex was quiet for a long time. Should I tell him the truth? Maybe someday, when he's strong enough to hear it without derailing his progress. Right now, he needs to consolidate what he's learned. Biology would complicate that. You're a better man than I could ever be. Then be a better mentor. Help me guide him. That's your role. The kitchen emptied as guests left. Just the 4 of us remained, me, Connor, Owen, and Alex, watching from the doorway. I lifted Owen onto the prep counter. Let him touch the fresh herbs I'd laid out. Smell that, little man. That's basil. Owen giggled, crushing a leaf in his tiny fist. The scent filled the air. Beside me, Connor prepped vegetables. Not because I'd asked, just because it needed doing. His knife work was clean now. Confident. He belonged here. Ashley took a photo with her phone, preserving the moment. Roy appeared beside Alex in the doorway. You did good, Roy said quietly. Bringing these 2 back together. I didn't do that, Alex replied. Gary did. I just gave him the opportunity. And that's what fathers do. Give opportunities, even when we don't deserve them. People ask me, how can you forgive someone who threw you away? The answer is, you don't. Not at first. Forgiveness without consequences is just enabling. My son had to earn back what he lost. Not with words, with actions, with humility, with time. Some think forgiveness means forgetting. It doesn't. It means remembering the pain, but choosing growth over grudges. I didn't forgive Connor for him. I forgave him for Owen. So that boy can grow up with a father who learned from mistakes instead of repeating them. They called me a burden, threw me out to make room for a baby. Today, I'm not just his landlord. I'm not just his last hope. I'm his father, and he's finally earned the right to call me that again. I looked at the 3 generations in my kitchen, the one I'd almost lost, the one I'd won back, and the one that represented hope. This, I thought, is what success really looks like. And to you listening to this family story, remember this. I once prayed to God when I had nothing. Sleeping on that shelter cot, wondering if I'd ever matter again. I asked him, why did you let this happen to me? And you know what? He didn't answer with words. He answered with people. Sister Agnes, Alex, Roy, Aaron, every person who believed in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. God doesn't always rescue you from the storm. Sometimes he teaches you to build a boat. Looking back at my own family story, here's what I wish I'd done differently. I wish I'd taught Connor about humility before I handed him an empire. I wish I'd made him work the line when he was 20, not 35. I wish I'd shown him that respect isn't inherited. It's earned one shift at a time. Don't be like me. Don't wait for crisis to teach your children what matters. Teach them now. Make them work for what they want. Show them that dad revenge isn't about destruction. It's about restoration. It's about loving someone enough to let them fail, then helping them earn their way back. My dad revenge wasn't cruelty. It was curriculum. And if you're a father who's been wronged, know this. The sweetest dad revenge is watching your child become the person you always knew they could be, not through your bitterness, but through your belief. Here's my truth. Blood doesn't make family. Showing up makes family. I raised a boy who wasn't mine by biology, and he became more mine than DNA could ever make him. That's not weakness. That's strength. And Connor, he learned that being a man isn't about power. It's about service. It's about choosing the hard right over the easy wrong, even when no one's watching. This family story taught me one final lesson. Forgiveness without accountability is just enabling. But accountability without love is just cruelty. You need both. Always both. If this story moved you, if you've ever felt thrown away, or wondered if you could rebuild, leave a comment. Tell me your story. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, maybe a father who's struggling, or a son who needs to understand what it means to earn respect. And if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, hit that notification bell. Because the stories we share here, they're not just entertainment. They're mirrors. They're lessons. They're proof that second chances are real if you're willing to work for them. Thank you for staying with me until the end. For listening to an old chef pour his heart out about the hardest year of his life and the best. A word of caution. The stories on this channel contain some fictionalized elements created for educational purposes. If this content isn't for you, feel free to exit and find something that suits you better. No judgment. Just respect for your time and your choices. Now go. Cook something with love. Hug your family. And remember, you're never too old to start over. You're never too broken to rebuild. And you're never just a burden. God bless.